201, week 2, part 3. So that was rhyme. I think we've now covered it. Let's hop skip over now and talk about rhythm. Rhythm's harder. Most of my students know what rhyme is, but rhythm, the reason rhythm and rhyme are hard to do is because I need a smaller class for starters. I can't do it with 30 students, and I really need you in front of me because I got to make you say the words over and over. It just takes practice. Individual, every person in the class would need to say a bunch of stuff out loud slowly to really learn how to do it. And we don't have time with 30 students in a class, and we barely have the ability to do it online. It just takes practice to hear. So rhyme is something people recognize. Rhythm, people have a much harder time with. You know that words in English are divided into syllables, right? I assume that you know this. So a word like alone has 2 syllables, alone. A word like Facebook has 2 syllables, face-book. Most people know that. Slightly trickier, and this is harder for a lot of people to hear, but syllables in English, and this is not true of other languages, but syllables, not all the other languages, but syllables in English come in 2 types. They are stressed or unstressed, meaning you sort of say it hard, that's stressed, or you barely say it, that's unstressed. So part of how to pronounce words is knowing not just what sounds they make, but the syllable stresses. So for example, the word alone. The word alone has 2 syllables. One of them is stressed harder than the other one. Can you figure out which one? Alone, alone, alone. It's the second one. Now, a lot of students have a hard time, but if you say it out loud over and over, alone, alone. Do you hear how you're barely saying the and you're very much saying the lone? Alone, alone, alone. Now, some students think I'm doing this with my voice and you could do it another way, but you really can't. You would never say, oh, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm just going to be all alone. You wouldn't say you're going to be all alone. That's crazy. Nobody says alone. I'm so sad. I'm all alone. Nobody says that. The word is pronounced alone. By the way, complicatedly, there are words where you can pronounce the stresses in different ways depending on what part of the country you're in. So people in different parts of America, some people say insurance, and some people say insurance. Some people say umbrella, and some people say umbrella, and that has to do with where in the country you're from. Okay, but the point is that for most words, there's a pretty basic pattern of pronouncing them. So the word alone has 2 syllables, and you say the second one a little harder. So you barely say the first one, that's unstressed, and you say the second one, alone, alone, alone. A word like Facebook is the opposite. In Facebook, you say the first syllable harder. You say Facebook. You don't say, oh, I have a Facebook account. Do you want to look me up on Facebook? I'm on Facebook. You don't say that. You say Facebook. Facebook. You don't say Facebook. Oh, that website that Mark Zuckerberg created? Facebook? Nobody says that. So that's it, and that's it. That's all you need to know for rhythm. That is rhythm in English. It is that simple. What poets do, now when you read a novel or a textbook, there generally is no rhythm to it. They just put words in whatever fucking order they want to say whatever idea they want to say. But in poetry, and this goes for a lot of Shakespeare plays also, because the characters in Shakespeare plays talk like poetry. In poetry, they do this thing where they create a pattern of how many syllables per line. And again, there are variations on this, but in Shakespeare plays, for example, there are usually 10 syllables per line. And so when you have a poem that goes a little bit and then the line starts over and then the line starts over. And because, in a book, the lines just go all the way to the end of the page. And when they hit the end, they hit the next line. But in a poem, they go a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. Usually the reason they're doing that, particularly in poetry written before 1900, is because they want a certain number. They're picking a certain number. They're doing a pattern. They're picking a certain number of syllables per line. But the pattern is more complicated than that, because not only are they picking a certain number of syllables per line and sticking to it, they're also arranging the words in such a way that there's a pattern to the stresses. And so in Shakespeare, you get a lot of poetry that sounds like this: alone, 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 alone. If you've ever heard of iambic pentameter, that's it. Iambic pentameter just means there are 10 syllables per line, and the first syllable and it goes in a pattern: unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. So you get a lot of poetry that sounds like alone, 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 alone. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Alone, 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 it was the worst of times. It was the best of times, alone, 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 it was the worst of times. Alone, alone, alone. So that's, and that creates a pattern. But there are lots of patterns you can make. So instead of going weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, you can go strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak. Facebook, Facebook, Facebook. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. Facebook, 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 Facebook. In the forests of the night. Facebook, 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 Facebook. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. You hear it? Facebook, 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 Facebook. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. In the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Symmetry. See, it's kind of it's again one of those weird rhymes. It doesn't quite fit, but it kind of does. It's not symmetry and gefilte fish. It's symmetry and I. Symmetry. It's kind of close. It works. But it's interesting and surprising. Okay, so this is going pretty good. I was going to show you the PowerPoint, but I'm just going to say it. I don't think you need this right now. So you can put little markers. Nobody does this, but if you want to, usually you put a little X over a syllable that's weak and a slash over a syllable that's strong. I'm not going to ask you to do that. Don't worry about it. But I do want to say, so why does this happen? Rhythm makes things memorable. And I already spoiled it for you, but I often ask students, what is the first line of Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities? Which is, by the way, a novel which should not have any rhythm to it. But Charles Dickens very famously uses rhythm in the opening sentence, and it makes it a famous sentence. It was the best of times, and then people know, even if they've never read the book, they know it was the worst of times. Because it has a rhythm. No rhyme, but rhythm. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Netflix recently made a movie called Rebecca, which is based on a novel. Has a very famous opening line. Last night I dreamt again of Manderley. Last night I dreamt again of Manderley. Makes it memorable. Pepto Bismol. You know Pepto Bismol? What does Pepto Bismol cure? Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea. How do I know this? From the commercial. Why do I remember this? Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, Facebook, 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 upset stomach, diarrhea, Facebook, 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 nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea, Facebook, 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 Facebook. You hear it? So that advertising often uses rhythm and rhyme. Why? Because the whole point of advertising is to make things stick in your head and make them memorable. And you know this. I'm sure you've noticed rhythm and rhyme make shit easier to remember. That's why it's so easy to remember all the lyrics to your favorite songs, but very difficult to remember shit from your science textbook. Which is why sometimes they make little poems out of it when you have to memorize something for school. So, all right, that's rhythm and rhyme. Now, the thing about rhythm and rhyme also is there's going to be variations. So it's when you see something that doesn't quite fit, that's not necessarily a mistake. Just like rhyming wood and flood, it's not an error. Variations make it fun. If you have no variation, the thing starts to sound robotic and annoying. So Edgar Allan Poe has a poem called The Raven. The rhythm and rhyme are perfect in the sense that they're always the same. The result is the poem is memorable and famous, although I actually think the poem sucks and is extremely annoying to listen to. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more. Ah, distinctly, I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And each certain sad uncertain rustling of each silken curtain thrilled me, filled me." It's annoying. It sounds like jingle jangle sing songy. When Shakespeare writes, there's variation in the rhythm and there's variation in the rhyme. So it sounds like poetry, but it also sounds like people talking, and that's what makes it interesting and beautiful. I'm not quite done with sound yet, but I am done with rhythm and rhyme. I'll see you guys in the next video.